This week, White Sox closer Michael Kopech threw an immaculate inning. That's 9 pitches, all strikes, to strike out the side. It's pretty rare. It made headlines across baseball, but what really grabbed my attention was that the only other White Sox player to do this was over 100 years ago. Sloppy Thurston was the first on August 22 of 1923. Sloppy Thurston. Who the is Sloppy Thurston? Well, let's start with the name. The answer you'll find at saber.org is that Sloppy was a nickname given to him ironically because he was apparently quite fastidious and always well-dressed. But I found other theories about his nickname. One says that he came by the nickname from his parents because he was always spilling milk on himself. Another, that I think is more probable, suggests that he inherited the nickname from his father's restaurant in Winslow, Arizona, that was known locally as Sloppy Thurston's Place. No matter how or why, his real name was Hollis John Thurston. But that's no fun, so I will call him Sloppy from here on. Sloppy was born in 1899 in Nebraska. Fremont, Nebraska, for you, Drew. I don't know how far that is from you. He lived a long life, 74 years, dying in 1973. And as a side note, when I see guys from 1900 live that long, it gives me some peace. If a guy who grew up without modern medicine and food standards, see Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, lived when pretty much everybody smoked and through the Depression, I figure I should at least be able to make it to 74. I hope. At some point, Sloppy and his family moved from Nebraska to Winslow, Arizona, where his father owned the restaurant that I mentioned, and then eventually to California. Sloppy went to high school in Sun Valley. During World War I, Sloppy served a 2-year hitch in the Navy and was stationed at a submarine base in San Pedro, California. He pitched there on weekends for the Navy base team. After the war, Sloppy joined the Salt Lake City Bees in the Pacific Coast League in 1920. He played for the Bees for 3 years before signing on with the St. Louis Browns in 1923. He didn't stick around long. Browns manager Lee Fole suspended him after just 2 games when Sloppy refused to throw batting practice. Sloppy said his arm was sore, but Fole either didn't buy it or didn't care. In any case, Sloppy was waived after his suspension and then picked up by the Chicago White Sox. He pitched in 44 games for the White Sox that year and eventually 149 games over 4 years. He threw 291 innings in 1924 for a bad ball club. Remember, this is just after the 1919 scandal, and the post-1920 White Sox were a bad team, and they really wouldn't be good for decades. But that day in August of 1923, in the top of the 12th inning, the White Sox hosted the Philadelphia Athletics. Sloppy Thurston in relief in the 12th faced Frank McGowan, Chick Galloway, and Sammy Hill, striking out the side on 9 pitches. But despite that heroic feat, and typical of the White Sox of that era, they would lose the game in the 13th. In 1924, he won 20 games for the last place White Sox and completed a league-leading 28 games in 36 starts. In the offseason, he was surprised when his contract for 1925 didn't contain a raise. White Sox owner Charles Comiskey replied saying, quote, "We finished last with you, and we would have finished last without you. So how do you think you deserve a raise?" Early in 1925, it was apparent that the previous year's workload of 291 innings caught up with Sloppy. He developed arm problems, and the next 2 years his ERA ballooned over 5. He was eventually traded to the Washington Senators for Roger Peckinpah. He threw 205 innings with the Senators in 1927 and went 13-13 on the season. For 1928, he went back down to the PCL for the San Francisco Seals. In 1929, he looks to have recovered from arm issues. Stats are sparse for the Pacific Coast League in the 1920s. We have no idea about strikeouts or any kind of advanced metrics. But we can see his ERA was 4.4, and he threw a lot. He threw 282 innings. He finished his major league career in 4 seasons with the Brooklyn Robins/Dodgers. before 5 more years in the PCL. Turns out that Sloppy also had a pretty good stick for a pitcher. He hit .270 for his career in 648 at-bats, 38 doubles, 10 triples, and 79 RBI. After his playing days, Sloppy was a minor league manager for 1 season with the Tacoma Tigers. And then he was a scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1939 to 45, where he is credited for signing Ralph Kiner, Hall of Famer. He also scouted for the Cleveland Indians for a few years from 1948 to 1950, and then with the White Sox from 51 to 67. While researching Sloppy, I learned that sadly his life ended by suicide. He shot himself. Sorry to read that. I feel for him and his family. Rest in peace, Sloppy Thurston.